Hey, beauty lovers and fellow entrepreneurs. I'm Yegi, the owner and founder of Yegi Beauty. Within 5 years of being my own boss, I was able to grow Yegi Beauty into a multi-million-dollar company. This podcast is where I share what it takes to be a successful entrepreneur in the beauty industry.
Hello. Welcome back to the Yegi Project. Today we have Kira with us from the Passion Center and the Passion-Based Method founder. We are so excited to have her because we're going to talk about how we can make money or be successful while pursuing our passion. Now, she's been in the industry for about 18 years, right? And she has a vast background of psychology, how the human behavior works, and all of that. And she's applied it to her own business to help other young entrepreneurs actually follow their passions, but yet be successful and make money with it. So we're excited to speak about this because I am very close to this topic, and I've always, if anybody has ever asked me, okay, what's one thing you would change in the world, because I love asking that to my guests, it actually would be for people to do what they love, because I do believe if people do what they love, they're going to be much happier. They're going to give out a lot more positive energy in the world, and it just goes around in circles, and we pass that on. So if every single person ideally was going to be doing what they love, I really think this world would be a much better and happier place. Um, but with that said, let me give the floor to Kira. Let her tell us a little bit about her and her story before we get to interview her and pick her brain a little bit.
Thank you so much, Yegi, and thank you so much for having me here. I think what you're doing is fantastic. So I'm so glad to be part of this and obviously to have the passion conversation. So a little bit about me. I was in the corporate space for 18 years, and towards the end of that trajectory, my body broke twice. The second time,
Oh
yeah, bodies do this. But
they do.
the first time, it sounds really horrible to say, but I was almost annoyed by it. I was just like, why are we doing this? I have so many things to do. Got to get on. Got the, pages of to-do lists to get out there.
Yes, but our bodies know when to stop us.
Right? That's exactly my experience. And I wasn't listening. I was not listening the first time. So it got better. We got better. I got better. And I entered into another rat race. So again, I'm climbing this corporate ladder, and there was a lot of great things. I was involved in a lot of great projects. But I wasn't aligned to really what my passion was. I thought I was. What was happening in that moment was I was aligned to my ambition, not my passion. They're very different things. I know that now, did not know that back then.
Yeah, that's hard to know even for me when I initially think about it, I'm like, wait, what's my ambition? What's my passion? Unless you know and somebody makes you aware, you just don't know. So that is why I'm excited to have this conversation.
Thank you. And that's exciting. That's exciting because that's why I love having these conversations. I think that we assume we should just know things about ourselves, about our bodies, about our inner worlds. But you're right. We can only be aware of what we are aware of. And that's why Dr. Tasha Urich, in a recent study, showed that 95% of people think we're self-aware, but really only 10 to 15% of people really are. And it's because we can't disassociate our experience and create create better language or understand our experience without actually journeying through it and creating distinctions for ourselves. So in that time period, now I know all of this now because this is the work I do, but I didn't know any of this back then. I was just following society's understanding of what success looked like. And to me, that was to be financially free. That was my objective. So
And I think that's a lot of what most people think about initially when they think about success. It's the money aspect of it, because they think once they have the money part of it, then they can live the life they want to live.
Right.
But people don't realize that that's not it. That's not mainly what success means.
No, you're absolutely right. There's actually a concept that I've been really digging into based on this experience, and it's called the linear success model. And a lot of our culture is based around it. And we're trained from education, right? Like you do a certain set of things because you're taught a certain set of things and you'll get a certain set of things. So if I learn what you're teaching me really well and I do it in a way that satisfies you and satisfies the standard, I get high grades. And the higher grades I get, the more advancement I get, right? And I graduate and we're praised for that. And then we enter the work world and it's the same thing, right? So I work really hard and then I get a promotion, which makes me, get access to more money, more responsibility, and I keep moving that up. And that's the linear success model. But it's a broken model because that's actually not how we grow. We grow in a mosaic way, and I'll talk about that a little bit later if you want me to. But right now, it's like that was the cycle I was in. I was in that linear success model, always going after the next thing. So when my body
and not stopping to reflect and realize, wait, what am I doing?
Girl, I was busy to stop and reflect. Like there was so much that was going on, and I mean, it's an exciting time too, because it's around that time where I bought my first place and, I was getting married. So there's all of these different aspects of my life that was being activated. And at the same time, I was working for an organization it was a top Fortune 15 and under. And it was highly performance driven. So a lot of my self-worth, a lot of who I was tied into my achievements. And that's the trap, right? So when my body
broke. What made you realize or break out of that cycle?
The second time my body broke.
Oh my goodness. Do you want to share a little bit more about that experience?
Yeah, for sure. So what ended up happening for me at first is, it's kind of multifaceted. It started with just having a sense that where I wasn't working for me. That was the sense. I didn't want to listen to it because I was
on just pushing it off, like, no, it's okay, it's gonna be fine, just keep pushing through,
right? Like avoidance, pure avoidance. And also, I mean, I had worked bloody hard to get to where I was, so nobody wants to completely disrupt that investment. So it was a challenge, and I could feel the challenge, but the more I didn't listen to it, the more my body started to change. So
started resenting you for not listening to it.
It's like the alarm bells, right? It's like, what? You're not listening to me? Let me just talk to you a little louder. Right? And then eventually my body was like, you know what? I'm done. You can keep being stubborn and not listening to me, and you can keep traveling on your jolly way, but this is where my train stops. And that experience was really scary because I developed a lot of autoimmune challenges. I refuse to call them diseases. And inside of that experience, it really humbled me. It made me realize that maybe I was focusing on the wrong things. I went on an inward journey. And for years after that, I can't even tell you how much I spent. And I live in Canada, which means there's paid healthcare here. And I spent way more than free to actually figure out what was going on with my body. And at the end of it, I mean, this is a very, very long story, but at the end of it, what I realized was that I had alignment issues. I didn't have health issues. The health was a consequence of me functioning outside of who I really was. And
I really believe that. I really, really do believe that. I do think our bodies and our physical selves do end up catching up with whatever's not right in our minds or in our passion in this case.
Yes.
But wow, that is one story to, make sure we learn from and pay attention to ourselves before our body fully breaks on us, right? And I think that's a great reminder for our listeners to pause and reflect and I did go through a similar thing in the past, and what I started doing is actually now monthly. I have a reminder on my calendar, and it just goes off. And sometimes I'm bad at it. I'll skip it and do it another time, but I try to monthly have time to grab my journal and sit in a corner and be like, okay, nobody talk to me. I'm gonna sit down and reflect and see where I'm with my life, with myself, like is this where I want to be, or what adjustments do I need to make in order for me to again fully be happy and content with my current self, right? Because we do change.
That's an amazing practice and it's an amazing discipline because I think what that whole experience taught me was how to have a better relationship with me, how to start dating myself, how to start understanding who I was. I was so focused on these external things, but at the end of the day, they don't matter if my body is breaking down. And I know that this may sound very simple, like it's something we should just know, but we don't just know that.
No,
Ton of
we
different
don't.
internal influences and external influences that are constantly shaping us and the decisions that we make. So,
It is, and it's hard not to listen to our external influences or even not the environment, the people we're in, social media. Like it's really, really hard to kind of shut all that off and be like, okay, no, what do I
yes,
want?
yes,
um,
I'm with that all day
so
long now, all day long.
good. I love that. I love it so much. And I'm glad we're having this conversation to make more people aware, to be, I guess, more self aware. Because although half of, like, what were the percentages? You said like
So
80,
95% of us,
95% of people think they are self aware, but really, we're not.
really, we're not.
So, one question, since we're getting to know you, what is one thing that most people in your community might not know about you?
I'm an open book. Like, I say things that maybe I shouldn't say most of the time. But I would say, what's one thing people don't know about me? Okay, so this might be something that people don't know about me. So when I first started this journey, I was about 13 years old. And
What?
I totally rejected myself for like 20 years after, but that's another story for another day. And at 13 years old, I had this vision for society. And I wanted to build at the time what was called Centers for the Soul. Because what I was seeing in my experience at the time was it's ironic because I ended up becoming the person that I was seeing and not wanting to be. So
Hey, maybe that's your that's your purpose, you're fulfilling it and you had a little hunch at 13 years old.
little hunch. It's amazing what we know when we're younger. That's all I got to say. So at 13, I was looking at the world and I was like, you know what? We need centers where people can just come inside of community and discover themselves and really get to know who they are again at the real level, at the core level, because I was at the time experiencing so much pain from people that were in pain. And I was like, what does it look like if we just had an infrastructure that can help us to heal in a more effective and efficient way so that we can function from a place of healing versus a place of pain? And I had a very spiritual overtone to that when I was younger, but I grew up in a really religious family who didn't approve of my spiritual meanderings. So they had a lot of things to say about how this wouldn't work and it would be very unsuccessful and I had to go down a certain path. So it's so fascinating.
But it just made you stronger, right?
It does. And it also shows you and shapes you how to start listening to yourself, because you always know at the end of the day, like the saying in this world is so true. You know everything. You really do. It's just a matter of getting back and remembering what you knew in the beginning.
So that brings up an interesting question. So, talking about like you know what you know or you what you need to know, what's a good practice that you can share for like our listeners and for myself too? How do you like how do you pay attention to that part of you to know and follow that intuition? I think it's also kind of intuition, right? That we're speaking of. So what is your personal best practice on your like day-to-day work or interactions with people to really pay attention to that part of yourself instead of letting the outside world kind of influence you or us?
First of all, I couldn't ask a better question. I think that that's the question that we should be asking a lot more of from everyone, from each other as well.
Ooh, I like
Right?
it.
I really do, because I think that everyone has their practice, and if we're sharing more of our practices, we all can collaborate in this experience and get to know ourselves better. But for me, I've been playing around with the last 4 years of passion. So I do a lot of studies on passion, what it is, what it isn't, how to distinguish it, how to discover it, what that journey looks like. And what I've determined from a lot of information that I've come across is that culturally, we are emotionally illiterate. And what do I mean by that?
We are. We are. We've been getting better over time, but overall, I totally agree with that. We are emotionally illiterate. Even in only in this past few years, people started talking about therapy or self-help and all of that. So we have a long way to
A long way
go.
to go. But it starts young and it starts with our systems. So, for example, emotions are our very first language that we learn. Our verbal language is the second language that we learn. And what happens in that time period between 0 to 12 months before we're able to actually verbalize and speak is we're picking up each other's emotions and we're communicating through life inside of our emotions. But because we're emotionally illiterate, the majority of us had parents who couldn't understand our emotional language and they couldn't give us emotional language. So here we are trying to form an emotional alphabet, but we're missing letters so that when we grow
We've
up,
never been
we've
taught.
never been taught. So when we grow up and we move into adulthood, we're missing foundational letters in our emotional alphabet such that we can't form proper words with it, we can't form proper sentences, and we can't communicate back and forth. So the whole practice that I've been really internalizing over the past 4 years is how to get more emotionally literate, how to start understanding the information through my emotions. Because
Yeah, yeah, that's very interesting. I never thought about it that
the
way.
more I can get the information from my emotions, the more I dig deeper into understanding and having a better relationship with myself, how to really understand how to fulfill my own emotional needs, and how to ensure that no one is crushing my emotional needs or things are crushing my emotional needs. And I think
So can you give us an example? Can you give us an example of that? Because it makes sense to me as like not a theory, but it makes sense to me as you're speaking about it. But how would I use that in practice? Can you give an example?
I'd love to. So let's use the example of this is going to be a big one. But, in the States, we had something really massive just happen that hit a lot of people. And that's going to impact and affect a lot of people for a very long time. And so, what you're seeing right now is a lot of reaction, which is fair. We need to have reaction. Inside of that reaction, we need to investigate deeper into why we're reacting the way that we're doing. And what we're being trained to do right now, and we saw it through COVID for the past 3 years, is we'll get hit with something, we'll react to it, and then something else will come along and we'll move to that and react to that, and then something else will come around and we'll move to that and react to that without ever truly processing and understanding the first event. And I'm seeing it this time, and it's going to give me goosebumps. I'm going to get emotional because
I got goosebumps. Like that's very true, and it's sad because I think it is the programming thing as a culture too, and because that's what the media and everything leads us to, right? It's like, okay, this is what we're focusing on. Now let's focus on this, and we don't know the underlying reasons why things move that way, but
so
Yeah, I think.
Sorry. Here's the practice.
Go ahead.
That's okay. Because I agree with you. I think that you bring up such a good point. The media is controlling the narrative, right? So whatever is the hot topic that's happening right now that creates a lot of polarization, let's keep that topic going so that we keep the conversation going. And then when things start dying, let's hit something else. Let's have something else. And how I process through my emotions as a practice, and something that I think would be helpful, is to first detach a little bit from the narrative, detach a little bit from what seems to be going on, and instead go inside and ask yourself one question: why am I hurt by this? Because that's what this is. We're feeling hurt. Why am I hurt by this? And just journal it. Just take yourself to a book and just write whatever comes up for you. This is called emotional purging. But inside of that, you're going to get information about how and why this event is impacting you in a very specific way. So for me, the event that just happened, what I discovered when I went through that process, and I took a weekend, I took 3 days to go through this process. I literally just shut myself down and said, I need my time right now to really think about what this actually means for me first, before I get into other people's narratives about what it means.
I love that. I love that practice, and I think more people need to do it. What I do is I do that anytime I'm feeling any weird emotions, which could be, hurt, stress, or any negative emotions I feel. And when they pile up, that's when I sit and reflect and really try to figure out what's going on with myself. But I love the practice of doing that for every event instead of letting it kind of pile on where you're like, oh my God, I'm a mess. I need to pay attention to myself now. So thank you for sharing that. I never thought of it that way.
But also there's one anchoring to that point. And the reason why the practice is important is because what you may find is that the topical layer that we apply to why we feel a certain way may be inaccurate. So at first, I was really angry and upset that a ruling could be made, or that could take away someone's right to do something. That was what I was initially upset by. What I learned in going through the process was that wasn't actually what I was upset by. What I was actually upset by was that somebody at some level can make a ruling but have zero infrastructure to assist with the fallout of that ruling. So for me, it was the infrastructure problem, which means that I can take my anger and turn it into passion and purpose if I can figure out how to find a solution for that. That makes the emotion productive, and it also helps me to understand the layers of the emotion and what it's actually guiding me to do.
Wow, honestly, I love that. I know I've recognized these things that you're talking about, but I've never heard it or even put it for myself the way you're putting it. And it makes so much sense the way you're breaking it down. And I'm so excited for our listeners to have this information. But wow. And because we are success or solution oriented, right? Now that you bring this up, when I reflect and look back, I'm like, wow, that is every time that I've had an issue that I wanted to overcome for myself. That is the way I was able to do it, is find an action that I can take that would take it or make it a solution of some sort. And that's how I was able to get back to my happy self or back to where I want to be. So I love the way you work with your clients with these, right?
Very
with the
much
passion
so.
project.
Mm-hmm. Very much so.
Okay, awesome. Before we actually get into more details about the passion topic, can you tell us, back to business, can you tell us your biggest challenge that you faced when you were making this transition into following your passion or getting into business of your own?
Oh man, there was a lot of challenges. I'll be straight up, But the number one, I would say, was the process of breaking down one identity to rebuild another. So, this I think is something that a lot of my clients struggle with as well when we're doing career disruptions or professional disruptions. Anytime you're going after a dream or a passion or something that's really meaningful to you, it takes a significant amount of trust in yourself before you even get a chance to understand or know who you are in that evolution, right? So for me, I was in the corporate space for 18 years. And for about a decade of that, I was spent in professional sales and working for some really big global brands. So if I was at a dinner party or I went out with my friends and they were like, "Hey, Kira, what are you doing?" And I'd be like, "Oh yeah, I'm the national sales manager for blah, 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 blah." People don't know all of the details of what I do, but they know what that is to some extent. It makes me relatable to them, and we can have a conversation about that. Now, in the beginning of the Passion Center, it was just a vision. Nothing was tangible. So it was really hard to communicate to other people or to myself, what is this thing right now? Who am I right now? It was this really awkward in between, like, I don't have really anything to put my identity to at this moment in time. And that was super uncomfortable, very, very uncomfortable. So the forming and the creation of it, and this is another thing that entrepreneurs should know, especially if you're designing something that maybe is a little bit newer for the first time, or there's no format or formula that came before it, is like, you're making this up as you go. And a lot of it is your own investment and your own understanding or your own perspective of something that the world doesn't know yet. So, and
that's what makes you special and successful.
Eventually, but in the beginning, it's hard because you only have a vision, right? And I think that was a real challenge for me. It was.
And for my experience too, I think what you're trying to say as well, in the beginning when you have the vision and idea, it is blurry.
Yeah.
It is a little blurry. You don't have all the details figured out, so it's really hard to run with it.
And people think you're crazy, and they're like, "Okay, you'll figure it out along the way, I guess." But yeah, that was challenging, layered onto the fact that your idea doesn't always come fully formed. You may have a really nice vision of what it looks like or what you think it'll look like, but your vision comes through iteration. And especially with my business, I don't know if it was the same way for you, Yegi, but for me, it was like, all right, I know what this looks like at the end, but I'm like not there. So what are all of these steps that need to happen in order to make this vision a reality? And it's a lot of testing and figuring out product market fit and all of that stuff that was very consuming in the beginning stages of this business.
Yes, well, my business that I currently am in, and that's where I'm pretty much making my money on, is the eyelash extensions beauty business. But I feel like this Yegi project is a whole new business for me, but I don't even look at it as a business. I've always, like you said, in my intuition and my gut, even as a kid, I knew my purpose was to help people. And you see, you call it the people's passions, but for me, I've always wanted to have centers where I can help low income children that don't have the ability or the mentors or even the parents who can lead them to successful situations and lifestyles, because a lot of that I always found that is missing in our public education. Nobody even teaches you how to really manage your money, or I don't know, how to be successful in real life compared to just following a career path. So that has been my passion forever, and I finally was like, you know what, I'm just gonna start off with the podcast, the Yegi project. And it is called a project too for myself too, because I am in that blurry stage of figuring out, okay, what is it actually going to be? How am I going to make it to that level where I can open these centers and really like help accomplish like my purpose? I know that's my purpose, right?
Oh.
So I definitely think I myself, and am in that beginning stage with this specific passion of mine.
I absolutely love that. And it touches such a delicate place in my heart because I was one of those kids that, was growing up without access. And it becomes extremely challenging and difficult to gain support, to gain access. It makes us stronger in the end, no word of a lie. Like that happens. But there's an easier path to becoming stronger.
Yes, and more people can get there, right? And like you said too, if people are pursuing their passions, and for me too, if they're doing that, they're gonna be happier. And if more people have the idea, even that, hey, there is help for you, go seek it, then I don't know, we can accomplish that world goal of hopefully more and more people being happy in their day-to-day lives and work lives. Yeah, so I'm very passionate about that. So maybe you can help me take my blurry vision into more clarity with your system, and I'm so excited to learn more about it.
My gosh, girl, I would love to. That's what I do all day long with my own clients. And I just want to, before I get into anything about that stuff, I just want to say this. What you just said about the world or people getting out there and doing the things that they love, and it makes up for a whole bunch of obviously life satisfaction and job satisfaction. But it does even more than that. A lot of the studies that we've been putting together is around something we term as passion health. And I really want to get this message across to your audience, to wider and wider audiences. But passion isn't just a platitude. We use it a lot as a platitude in society, but passion actually equates to health. Not only mental health, social health, but also physical and biological health, because we're all one system. And when you have higher levels of emotions that are pouring through your bodies, it creates what we call tonic chemicals, meaning medicine for your body. When you have more of the harsher emotions that are not processed or traumatic or painful, they produce toxic chemicals, which are very bad for the body. I had to go through a whole bunch of stuff in order to get to this knowledge right now. So it's
Oh yes, honestly, I've done a lot of reading, so what you're saying makes a lot of sense, and it's not really easily accessible. You have to do research to really kind of get that concept down, but the gist of it is that if you're happier overall, I'll just keep it simple with that word. If you're happier overall, then you are going to be healthier.
very much so. And there's actually, if anyone wants to read up more on this, and you aren't familiar with blue zones, then I would say that's your first place to check this out. That's where I started to put the pieces together and I started my research there. But they are pockets of people in the world that lives to be centenarians, so over 100 years old and close to perfect health. But not just individuals. On average, their communities live in this way. So, and they're spread out. There's about 5 of them internationally. But a lot of their philosophies about life and how they move through life, the consistency is all there. And what is learned from doing the research on these types of people is that only 20% of our diseases come from genetics. 80% is lifestyle.
Wow.
80% is lifestyle.
Wow.
So a lot of these people are living to be that age, so they're getting biologically rewarded for a behavior. We're getting biologically penalized for the opposite behavior. So when you look at how passion plays into that story, it's all about really getting to understand what nurtures and creates environments where you can thrive and we can thrive. That creates health. And so I just get really fueled by these conversations or these types of conversations. Because
I do too. I love it so much. So excited right now. I find these topics so interesting. It's like, whoa, it's not only medicine, or I don't know, it's like a deeper secret that we don't know. And like you said, there are these pockets of communities that are living this way, and hey, maybe we can learn one or two things from them. So let's talk about the Passion Center. So tell me a little bit more in detail of what you do. So we've talked about passion, why it's important, and why it's such kind of a new way of looking at career, I want to say. How does somebody, I guess a lot of questions that my listeners, I know they're going to have, or even that I have, is like, okay, what is my passion? I'm not good at it, right? I'm passionate. Let's say I'm very passionate about singing, but I suck at singing. What do I do? How do I kind of listen to my heart, but also make money, or get to the place of making money with my passion?
So this is a conversation that comes up a lot, and I'm so glad you asked it, because really what has happened based on the research that I've done is that the general public has a misinformed view of what passion is and how it works. So when we see an end product, we assume that the end product happened by, we basically create a formula, right? We create a formula where it's like 1 + 1 = purple. But that's not, and that's not how anything works. We don't, when we say the words like, let me find my passion, or I found my passion, and we link it to something else, it has nothing to do with that thing. So me being passionate about singing has nothing to do about singing. It has nothing to do about singing. Passion is about something different. It's about what you have identified as being meaningful. So passion, in a simple formula, is meaning times investment. It's finding the things that are meaningful to you, and it's investing in those things over time that help you to achieve the neurochemicals that are responsible for passion. Now, when we think about somebody who's passionate about singing, the very first place I want to go with someone like that is I want to really get under there and ask them a few questions. Why are they passionate about singing? What does singing represent in their world? How did they realize that they were passionate about singing? I want to get to know them at a deeper level, because by understanding what their coordinates are, I can orient them to different things that are going to be expressive of their passion no matter what. So it's not simplified in the sense of my passion is linked to a thing. And also we have to remember that we live in a very capitalistic society, and this is an entrepreneurship podcast. So we're constantly trying to see, how do I marry my passion with something to do so that I can make money? Cool. I'm going to get to that. But before I get to that, we have to know that passion came before capitalism. So our bodies work differently.
You tell us.
So our bodies work very differently, and they were engineered very differently than our capitalist minds project. So what we have to do is, how do we intersect? And the way to do that, actually, it's seen through, have you ever heard of Ikigai?
No, I haven't.
No? Okay, so it's a model that came out of a blue zone in Okinawa, Japan. And Ikigai stands for my reason for being. And they kind of have simplified this idea of marrying all of these different concepts in order for us to feel more connected to the things that we do and feel more passion and purpose. So it's what you love, what you're good at, what the world needs, and what you can get paid for. And it's the marrying of those four intersections that actually get you into that sweet spot that we're all looking for. We're all looking for.
Yes.
But you have to start with the end in mind. So it's not so much about, being married to this thing and having an identity that attaches you to that thing. That's not going to help your passion score go up. That's only going to frustrate you. What is going to help your passion score go up is to really identify your inner things for why. So we have some tools at the Passion Center that I work with my clients for. At the beginning, it's never a conversation about what your business idea is. That comes way later. The first thing is, what is your internal architecture? What makes you uniquely qualified to solve a certain problem or to do a certain thing? Let's look there and let's actually get under your hood a little bit, look at your mechanics, and figure out how do those integrate with what's happening in the world, how to create relevancy in the world. And if you can create relevancy in the world through your unique value, monetization is a net result of that. Like that's these are outputs. What we need to identify is your inputs. And once we understand what your inputs are, the outputs are no-brainers. They will come, So it's flipping the conversation a little bit so that we can see this in a way that works and models to reality. And if we see it in a way that works and models to reality, then we can have better results. Until we do that, we'll go around in circles and people will have a really hard time understanding how to do this thing that really doesn't work out because, again, it's 1 + 1 = purple.
Yeah, and honestly, I've worked with a lot of people too. I'm very passionate about this topic as well, and I've done some research for myself and working with a lot of people, even close friends. What you're saying, it's so on point, but the way you explain it and the way you're breaking it down, I can already envision how you work with your clients. I'm like, wow, I love her. But at the same time, I have a question for you that it's like a perfect place to ask this question while we're talking about it. But what kind of change do you typically see in your clients when you're working with them? And what is like that most surprising aha moment for them when they work with you?
Ooh, okay. So in order to answer this question, I do need to break down what I do because I don't just do one thing. These are very layered transformation. Human transformation is a very layered process, and it really depends on goals. So I have a passion-based incubator that does the whole thing through and through. And then what I also have are ways in which people can take certain things based on where they're at, right? Not where I want them to be at. So to make this really simple, there's about 5 different programs and courses that we have here at the Passion Center. The first one that I recommend everybody do before they even start touching any of the other programs or processes is a program called Unblocked. And what we do inside of the journey of Unblocked is we actually help you to confront your pain so that we can remove them so that you can actually have a better understanding and chance at seeing yourself clearly without any kind of negative bias getting in the way. Because that's the number one thing that's going to block us from moving down with our passion later on. So we better get that at the front end so that we don't have to deal with that on the back.
Yeah. Get rid of the roadblock.
Get rid of it. Just like let us know what it is. Let's see it front and center so that we can dismiss it. Once we get there, then we move into your Discover Your Passion drivers, which is all about helping you to understand what your internal layers are. So out of those 2 products, what clients usually come out with in the first Unblock program is this feeling of just lightness. Like all of the weight on their shoulders have been removed from them and they can now clearly see the path forward. So that's really cool. And that's always an
I love that.
The second one is Discover Your Passion drivers. And this is a really special one for me because this was the very first program I ever created when I was on my path. And this is the one that people get the most just brain explosions out of. And it's getting to what I call their core 4 passion drivers. Once you understand what your core 4 passion drivers are, so the things that help you activate your passion, that means that you can become your own engineer around what you can put yourself into that's going to give you all the feels. And this helps people to take away the noise, right? So remove the noise, remove all of the ideas that don't align and only stick with the ones that do. And that gives you your best chance of feeling and experiencing and expressing your unique you. So that's a really cool experience that people get to. But my other programs, they're all about business building. So I've had people that have literally moved from one career and stepped into the space of entrepreneurship using their passion drivers, and they've scaled and excelled in their business, quit their jobs, and completely had things in the marketplace that they've built from. I had one person who was a real estate investor for many years. She was an entrepreneur who started to completely become dispassionate about what she was doing. And when we first met, we met in France, and she said, Kira, I just want to be a speaker. Like, I feel like there's a story I have inside of me. And I said, well, let's do it. So we could start there. And 8 months later, she moved from Atlanta, Georgia to Spain. This was pre-COVID. And she did that with her daughter. She was there for a year, wrote a book, started speaking on stages, and completely transformed her career and her life based on the work that we did together. Another person who was in sales is now a huge, media icon that has gone out and really impressed upon the world her vision and her voice. So the confidence that happens as a result of it, the clarity that happens, the vision that happens, and that manifests inside of the businesses that are created that we do. So yeah, I mean, I could talk about.
I love that. And there is so much need for your work. Like I said, currently I feel like I'm going through some sort of a transition as well, or just adding on to my pile. So whatever you're speaking of, I know personally a lot of people that go through the same thing too. They're just kind of stuck in limbo with what they want to do, what they're doing, but there's fears or there's unclear paths. So I really, really admire the work that you're doing, because I know it must be helping so many people. And I kind of can't wait to personally experience that with you too. So I'm gonna make sure after the podcast I reach out to you too and be like, help me, I think I need some help right now.
It would be my honor. Please do that. I would love to talk to you about this more.
But yes, and that's another thing too. Like, I feel like I love where I'm with my life, but I'm always looking to grow too, and that's why I also started the Yegi project, because what I realize is that happiness is not just state. You're not just going to be happy and you're done. Happiness is constantly being in that evolving state with yourself to keep achieving that, fully fulfilled, happy life. So that's why I'm like, I always wanted to do a podcast, but the Yegi project, it has to be called a project, because I'm never going to be just in that warm place where I'm happy with it. I'm always going to want to learn more, do more, to grow like with the people around me. So I'm excited to have Kira to help us with that process.
I just wanted to commend you on that, because I feel like that is a success mindset. There is no person on this planet that I have seen that has reached that level of the pinnacle of success that feels like they got it all. They're always watching further and further and further and learning more. And I think that's the richness of life. When we put a pause button on that, our bodies respond in negative ways. Our bodies wants to be challenged and wants to learn. So give it what it wants. I love that.
Yes, exactly. And it doesn't mean that you're not happy with yourself or your job or career or whatever it is. It just means that you want to continue fulfilling that human nature of wanting more. One thing that the phrase I like to always say is that we always have to accept and be happy with where we're at, and work on accomplishing more or where we want to go. Because unless we are happy in our current state, we're not going to be able to have that success in where we want to go.
Girl, you're giving me all the feels. I am so aligned with your messaging.
Well, I want to pick your brain a little bit more. I have a few more questions for you. I love talking to you. You're very passionate about the topics you're talking about as well, and I could feel that in your energy, and I'm kind of big on that too. So it's a pleasure having you. So before we let you go, our last question to you would be we spoke about being you louder when you're trying to pursue your passion, or you're trying to be successful in what you're doing. But a lot of times people do fear kind of being themselves, or really like putting all of them out there. What last word of encouragement and advice would you give to those people out there?
So fear is an interesting thing that we battle through. And it's helpful if we understand why we're scared, right? If we understand why we're scared, then we can create little antidotes to move past it. And it's very personalized. So I don't love creating just kind of standardized pathways. However, the one thing about fear that we should always know is that our brain is what's called a predictability machine. So, what it likes in order to keep safe or feel safe is to know and have experience with something in order to validate itself or allow it to feel safe enough to like move into step with whatever it is your goals, your visions, or your dreams are. So, there's a concept that I use called microdosing change, right? So, the brain doesn't know what it doesn't know. It's your job to teach it. And you teach it by giving it little tiny steps that you go towards that create safety around the step you're taking. So, for example, I had an author, well, previously wasn't an author, was an author after we were finished together, but in the beginning they were terrified. I mean, they had so many things that they wanted to say and so many things that they wanted to write in, but they were afraid of judgment and how people would think of them and all of the layers. It's all there. It's all real stuff they had to work through. So in the beginning, it was just a matter of writing. That was it. We didn't go all the way down. We didn't talk about publishing. We didn't talk about any of that stuff. At first, we just needed to make the brain feel safe and start enjoying the process of just writing, right? And then maybe putting it somewhere like a platform, right? But these baby steps, like, they may sound inefficient, but they are the most efficient way of breaking through your blocks in order for you to move forward and proceed with the things that you're scared of doing. And the reason for that is if you don't do it that way, then a couple of things start happening. We start maybe procrastinating, we start avoiding, we start self-sabotaging, and all of that stuff will get in your way more and will be least efficient on your path and on your journey to getting out there. So I would say that is one solution to a problem. However, this fear is very, very connected to your own personal makeup, your background, your experience, your nuances. So getting an understanding, again, of your internal landscape to understand where it's actually coming from, then we can have a personalized, customized way of helping you navigate your own fear in a healthy way that gets you through it. And again, everything's about creating safety for your neurology. If your neurology doesn't feel safe, it's just not going to make it very easy for you to do the things you want to do. That's where fear comes in.
Yes, and that's how humans are built, right? We're built to survive. So whenever we get thrown on a big challenge, we kind of go into survival mode instead of really like trying to take it step by step and progressing. So yes, very, very, very good advice. Again, from my own research and knowledge too, baby steps is always the way. Even recently, we've talked about building habits, and it goes over the same concept. And I think it just really can be applied to habits slash like the small actions that you can take in order to build success. But Kara, I know you have to go. Thank you so much for your time. It was such a pleasure to speak with you. Hopefully, we can connect and chat more in the future. But so I do want to let you guys know before we let her go, we are gonna connect and chat back with her on July 20th, and that's 12:30 p.m. Pacific time and 3:30 p.m. Eastern time, and we're gonna talk about passion. So it's get curious about passion conversation with Kira Day, and we'll be on her platform. We'll link the information and details below, so make sure you check it out. There's so much knowledge and so much that we can learn by just even listening to her speak. So it was a pleasure to have you, and I look forward to speaking with you soon. Have an amazing, amazing day.
Thank you so much, Yegi. It was such a pleasure being here. I love your energy. I love what you're up to. Keep doing that strong. Have a great one, guys.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening. Please rate and review this podcast. Follow and engage with us on social media under the Yegi Project. And if you're interested in being a guest, email info@theyegiproject.com. And don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss out on any future episodes.